at this point, we're going to officially get started. I want to welcome you to the Role of the Sub-Site Supervisors, a mini supervisor orientation webinar. Again, I'm Amy Kanata with Education Northwest in Portland, Oregon, and I'll be the host for the session today. We have a team supporting us. I want to start with Eric Pell from the Corporation for National and Community Service, who's going to welcome everyone. Take it away, Eric.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us in today's webinar. On behalf of the Corporation for National and Community Service and the VISTA program, we're very excited to have you learn about the role of sub-site supervisors and be part of our monthly VISTA webinar supervisor series. As we learn more about the information supervisors and sub-site supervisors need and desire in order to have successful VISTA programs, we design these webinars for you. So stay tuned to the vistacampus.gov website for upcoming webinars. We look forward to seeing you in future webinars. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Amy.
Thank you, Eric. So you've already heard from Eric and me. We're also joined today by our colleagues Lois Morgan from Bank Street College of Education in New York City. And Lois will be monitoring the chat panel and helping us facilitate Q&A. And we would also like to welcome Kapila Wiwagama. Kapila serves as an independent management and training consultant and facilitator and has worked with the Corporation for National Community Service, Peace Corps, and other nonprofit organizations across the country. He's part of the VISTA Supervisor Orientation team. When he's not facilitating VISTA training, Kapila teaches a graduate course on cultural competence in community development at Loyola University in Chicago. And we'll hear more from Kapila in just a few minutes. So I'd like to thank the team today. Here's a list of our session goals. This is what we hope you'll get out of the webinar today. We want to make sure that you recognize how you fit into the National Service Network, which gets a little bit at that language of sub-site and sponsor and intermediary that we talked about earlier. We'll explain the mission of VISTA through real-world examples. And then by the end of this session, you should be able to create a list of common tasks that are expected of sub-site supervisors and also prepare for effective member management. So hopefully that's what you're all signed up for today. So let's start with how you fit in. As a sub-site supervisor, you will work closely with your intermediary organization to divvy up the responsibilities of managing the VISTA project. So each partnership is different, so we suggest that you communicate early and often with your intermediary organization to outline roles and tasks. In general, here's the assignments for each. The intermediary organization, in general, is ultimately responsible for all aspects of the program. However, the role of the sub-site supervisors is crucial. Intermediaries are usually responsible for the following: submitting the project concept paper and application for VISTA members, coordinating aspects of the project beyond the scope of the VISTA's work, submitting regular reports to CNCS State Office. They also often assign and share tasks with their sub-sites like recruiting, interviewing, and selecting candidates, providing training opportunities for VISTAs, and of course the day-to-day supervision of VISTAs. So those are usually shared tasks, and you'll need to communicate directly with your intermediary to figure out which pieces you'll be responsible for in your project. Again, sub-site supervisors are major contributors to the success of VISTAs because they provide the direct day-to-day leadership for members. That kind of leadership includes coaching, support, providing workstation, collecting data for reports, and monitoring attendance and use of leave days. So let's take a look and learn a little bit more about how you fit in to this network. As you can see, and I'll circle the area that I think applies mostly to our group today, you reside within a very strong network made up of programs across the country that includes AmeriCorps VISTA programs and state offices for each state. So this state office here is an example of one state office of many. This framework is a good example of how projects with subsites are structured. So the intermediary organization is the little green one right here, and then within that they may have multiple subsites. In this example there's just 2, but there could be 50. And then you as the subsite supervisor is situated here, and you have members that you support. So that's how we sort of define the different roles. We'll use the term intermediary to refer to this green position here, and then subsite to refer to the sites that are supporting the intermediary organization or part of that intermediary organization program. So hopefully this helps everyone see how they fit in with the national service structure. A little bit about your role as a supervisor. You're all of these things. This example was provided by an intermediary organization from within the national service family that wanted to use this to train their sub-site supervisors so that they could understand their roles. So you're a guide, you facilitate learning for the VISTAs, you recognize their unique contributions and challenges, you offer praise and feedback, and you encourage them to be innovative. As a collaborator, you're brainstorming, assigning projects, working with your intermediary, helping the VISTA understand goals and initiatives of your organization. You're also an advocate, someone who provides resources like we talked about, office space and supplies, and ensures that other people in your organization support and encourage your VISTA as well. Of course, you're a supervisor. You check in often with your member to see how their assignment is going. You clarify questions related to their VISTA assignment. You see if their workload is manageable. And then, of course, you hold them accountable to their assignment description or their VAD. You're a visionary, someone who connects the purpose of VISTA's assignment with the organization's vision for the future. You're a communicator. We've already talked about this a little bit, ensuring that the VISTA is aware of news and information, procedures and policies. You encourage them, and you also ask for input and feedback from your VISTA member. You're a connector who introduces your VISTA to others in the community so that they can become visible to your community and can identify key, and also you help them identify key community leaders and colleagues that will support them throughout their service year. And finally, many of you are team leaders who provide clear expectations for VISTAs in their work and life, and they're also you want to include them as an integral part of your team. So let's take one more look at how you fit in. And this is an activity that we're going to do. We're going to go and visit the VISTA Campus website. For those of you that are not familiar with the VISTA Campus website, it's a site that's dedicated to everything about VISTA. There's sections for members, leaders, state offices, and supervisors. We often call your section the SUPS campus, and you can see it's highlighted there in blue on the lower right of the circle. And this is a place for you to get resources to help you manage your VISTA project and also connect with other supervisors. So a quick poll here, how many of you have visited the VISTA campus? And what I want you to do is use the red X if you have not visited, or the green check if you have visited. And they're right next to the raise hand button. So I'm going to click the check because I've been to the VISTA campus quite often. Just want to see how many of you are familiar. Quite a few, it looks like. And if you haven't visited the campus, don't worry. We'll send you a link specifically to where the materials from this session are posted. Some of you have not yet visited. Okay, well, hopefully this next activity will give you, entice you to visit the campus and access resources that were created specifically for VISTA supervisors. So let's go ahead and visit the campus and review a resource that was designed for sponsors to work in partnership or intermediary organizations to work in partnership with their site supervisors to lay a foundation for project success. So I'm going to share a web browser with you and walk you through how you can download this document. So Mitch, our tech assistant, has posted the directions. And we just opened the browser. You should be seeing VISTA Campus. You can go ahead and log in if you have a login, or just enter the campus as a guest. I'm going to click enter as a guest because that's easiest right now. And you'll be taken to a page that looks a little bit like a desk. And this is the interface for the supervisor topic area. I want you to go to the section in the middle called Roles and Responsibilities and click on that binder. And then once you click on that binder, you'll see 6 topic areas, and I want you to go to the topic area in the lower right called Working with Subsites and click on that one. And again, these instructions are posted in the chat. You'll see them. Mitch put them up there for you. Once you get to the Working with Subsites page, I want you to scroll down to the document called VISTA Sponsor and Subsite Supervisor Tasks at a Glance. Go ahead and click that document and open it. I'm also going to post the URL for that document in the chat, just so you have it. And go ahead and open that up, and what you should see, it's a Word document so that you can edit it on your own. And it's a grid that's a checklist that includes all the major tasks and responsibilities for both sponsors and subsites. And so this document can be used along with your sponsor or intermediary organization to decide who's in charge of which tasks. And we'll talk a little bit more about those specific tasks in just a minute. We've designed this webinar to align closely with this document. The other thing about this document that can be helpful to you is for pretty much every task area, we've included a link to resources on the VISTA campus where you can go and find tools and materials and readings related to that specific topic area. So if, for example, you want to focus on on-site orientation and training, there's a link to additional resources for on-site orientation and training. So now that we've had a chance to look at the task list, I encourage you to share that with your intermediary organization. They may not have seen it yet. It's a little bit new, so that you can sort of know who's in charge of which piece and also have resources at your disposal to do that work. Okay, let's go ahead and head back to the PowerPoint presentation. And again, I'll make sure that this particular document is posted on the web along with the recording. So if you didn't get it, don't worry, we'll make sure that you have access to it later. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Kapila, who's going to walk you through key background information everyone needs to know about CNCS and VISTA. Take it away, Kapila.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, good afternoon, and greetings, everyone. So as Amy pointed out at the beginning, one of our goals for this webinar today is to examine the mission of the VISTA program. So with that in mind, we are going to be looking at history and key facts of the VISTA program, VISTA mission, and role of the VISTA member. So as a sponsor, whether you are an intermediary or sub-site supervisor of a VISTA member, it is very important that you all become familiar with the background and mission of the AmeriCorps VISTA program. Because you know your members are going to arrive at your sites with a good understanding of the VISTA program, and your understanding of the VISTA background and the mission will help both of you to begin and operate with the same focus. So as you all already know, the VISTA Volunteers in Service to America started in 1965 as part of the War on Poverty, and with the mission to build capacity of nonprofit organizations and communities to help bring individuals and communities out of poverty. So let's look at some historical facts. In 1993, President Clinton started AmeriCorps, and VISTA was incorporated into the AmeriCorps network of programs. Then, as many of you know, around 7,000 members serve each year, and there are more than 1,000 projects nationwide. So there are two ways individuals serve through the VISTA program. Members serve full-time for 1 year or for 8 to 10 weeks as summer associates. So let's take a quick look at some of the VISTA impact facts. I would like to call them the wow factors. So over the last 49 years, 190,000 VISTA members have served and contributed in many ways in helping people move out of poverty. For example, VISTA members have helped raise $170.1 million in funds and in-kind contributions for anti-poverty efforts. Also, they have served 115,000 veterans and military family members. VISTA members also promote community volunteerism, and if you look at the past facts, they have mobilized 1.1 million community volunteers who have contributed a total of 11.7 million hours. And also, there is another significant fact, and that is that 80% of former VISTA members continue to volunteer after their VISTA term. This is a very important factor for all of us as intermediary and sub-site supervisors, sponsors. Why? Because our intentional efforts to provide our members with meaningful and successful capacity building project opportunities will contribute to this great trend. As you all know, our happy former VISTAs will continually look for opportunities to serve. So we want to put this on the table and remind you the great opportunity each one of you have to plant that seed. So now, let's take a moment to review the primary focus of VISTA members' role. As you may already know, our members' role is to serve as capacity builders. So what I would like to do is to do a quick poll to gauge our current understanding of capacity building in the VISTA context. So as you can see from the polling panel to the right side of this slide, there is a question with 4 answers. So I'm going to invite you to choose whatever the appropriate answers to the question of what capacity building for a VISTA member is, and please submit.
This is Amy, just to let you know how we're doing on progress, Kapila. We have about 50 out of about 170 attendees that have completed the poll. So go ahead and get your answers submitted, folks. We'll give you a little more time here.
Thank you, Amy.
We'll give folks 30 more seconds to complete the poll, and then we'll go ahead and close it and publish the results. So about 30 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and publish the results so everyone can see them. The technology is making me wait a second here, folks, but we'll have this up on the screen in just a minute. Okay, so.
Thank you, Amy. So, as you all can see, most of you have actually chosen number A, and also some of you have chosen number C, but we have only very few percentage of our representatives or attendees who have chosen number B and C. So this is very, very encouraging because as you all have already pointed out, capacity building is to create, expand, or strengthen an organization's systems or processes, as well as to transfer knowledge, products, and relationships to the staff and volunteers of the host site. So when the VISTA members focuses on building capacity, it allows you, your organization, and the community to sustain the VISTA project activities once the project period has ended. This is very, very important because ensuring the sustainability of your VISTA project is the sponsor, which means the intermediate supervisors or the sub-site supervisors, and that is your responsibility. The way your VISTA members contribute to this process is by building the capacity of the organization, of the project, and the community. So I think it's time for us to take a look at a real-life VISTA assignment example. So in this example, imagine a VISTA member is assigned to design, develop, and implement an after-school tutoring program. So our question is, looking at this assignment, what are the capacity building activities this VISTA will carry out? So we are kindly inviting you to use the chat function, and please share your thoughts.
And just a technical note, folks, you may need to close out the poll by clicking on the little X on the blue bar in order to show your chat panel. Be sure to send your chat to all participants.
Thank you, Amy.
I see some answers. Volunteer management in kind drive management and community outreach, policy and procedural development, excellent. Recruit and train volunteers, research best practices, perform needs assessment. Yes, these are all excellent examples of capacity building activities. Create a marketing
Thank you, Lois. Thank you, Lois. And as Lois pointed out, and as you all can see from the chat function, there are some great concrete examples as some of the ones that Lois pointed out. So thank you, because that really helps us your understanding or the way you are looking at the VISTA's capacity building activities. Now, interestingly, as we all see with this given real-life example or the project, the primary activity of this project is to provide actual tutoring to the students. So it was not one of the activities that you had identified to the question, what are the capacity building activities this VISTA will carry out? And that's because, as most of us know, providing actual tutoring is not a capacity building activity, but it is a direct activity. So here's the next question. Although providing actual tutoring is a direct activity, do you think the VISTA might do some tutoring? And if so, for what purpose? So let's use the chat function again. And
so far I see no's.
Thank you.
And now some unless something or other. So yes, I'm getting some more varied responses. To train volunteers, to be able to train volunteers. Again, there's a mixture. This is an interesting question.
Great. Thank you, Lois. So this is a great reality check, because some of you, thought, no, the VISTA should not be doing any tutoring because it's a direct activity. And some of you are saying there may be times that the VISTA might be doing some tutoring. And some of the examples you have pointed out, I see to train the volunteers, I think to be a role model or a training model.
Yes.
And also I see to get a better understanding about the program, activities, and the functions. So these are, again, very, very important and meaningful and useful examples, because it's not that the VISTA is not going to do any tutoring at all. The VISTA might do some tutoring, but as all of you have pointed out, who had given the reasons, this actual tutoring has a link to the other capacity building activities that the VISTA is primarily responsible for. So that's one way to look at, in case if the VISTA is actually doing some direct service, as in this example, in relation to tutoring. So this is a great segue to our next theme, and that is about direct service activities. So let's take a moment to review the concept of direct service in the VISTA context. So as you can see, direct service is to provide immediate solutions to help people in need. These can include activities like tutoring, performing manual labor, teaching, doing clerical work, or counseling. And also, as some of you pointed out, there may be some direct service the VISTA member will carry out that has a direct sort of a impact relation to the capacity building activities that they are primarily responsible for doing. So let's get some thoughts about when would it be appropriate for a VISTA member to carry out direct service outside of what we had talked about. So let's again use the chat function and see what are some of your thoughts around that.
This looks very interesting. To pilot a concept, in their orientation to the new org. To sign people up for government programs, I'm not sure. You might want to expand on that. I'm not sure what you mean. Exception, all hands on deck. Yes, that's a very important one. If everyone at the site is doing something, you need to participate as well. As a pilot program, excellent.
Thank you, Lois. So these are again great examples. So I just want to highlight a couple of things here based on the examples you have given. Several of you are pointing out that some of the direct service the VISTA will engage will lead to orienting the member to the organization, to the program, to their project, which makes a lot of sense. As well as some of you had also pointed out maybe in some administrative tasks at the organization. One of the examples that I see here is about answering the phone. So based on your organizational context, there may be certain administrative activities such as answering the phone that is currently being shared by rest of the staff, because you may not necessarily have somebody individual responsible to answer the phone. So as a VISTA member, somebody comes on board and you also invite VISTA to be part of that process. Since everybody else in the organization is taking part, so the VISTA also takes turns in answering the phone. Now that is a direct service activity. But again, because it's a shared activity by the organizational staff, then it becomes okay for a VISTA member to be part of. So there will be some administrative task that is shared by the organizational staff that as a team member, VISTA might also be contributing to it. And then, of course, the VISTA taking care of his or her own administrative tasks will be also part of the direct service that she or he will be involved in. And sometimes, the organization will have service activities. Now, there are annual volunteer service activities such as the MLK Day, service activities, or AmeriCorps Week service activities. Now, participating in those activities generally will be considered as direct service. Should the VISTAs participate in those kind of activities? Certainly, because that's definitely one of the expectations as a VISTA member, being part of the AmeriCorps program, that they also take part in such service events. So what we want you to think about, whenever there is a situation that VISTA has to do some sort of direct service activity, to always see what is the connection of that activity to their primary role and the responsibility of building capacity. So thank you all. Within few minutes, you all have put some great stuff on the table, some very meaningful reflections and thoughts. So we encourage you to revisit and really think about and have that very clear understanding of VISTA's role as the primary role as a capacity builder. Then when it comes to direct service, how that might sort of how the VISTA might get involved in doing some direct service, and then be very clear about the rationale behind of whatever the little direct service that they are going to be part of. So with that, I'm going to next invite Eric Powell to talk about rules and regulations. Eric?
Thank you, Kapila. At the pre-service orientation, also known as PSO, we explain the rules and regulations to the VISTA candidates, but you will definitely want to be familiar with them as well as the terms and conditions of VISTA service, since the VISTAs will probably first be coming to you with questions that they have. So to start, VISTAs are prohibited from outside employment and are not permitted to earn outside income while in VISTA. We do prohibit VISTAs from engaging in political activity. Of course, they are permitted to vote as a citizen in a general election, not wearing their VISTA t-shirt. But the VISTA program is nonpartisan, and we want to make sure that the VISTA is protected and that the community does not see VISTA as taking sides. We do fingerprint VISTAs at the pre-service orientation because any criminal activity on behalf of the VISTA can be and probably will be grounds for termination, so we do discourage criminal activity. We also don't allow religious activity. For example, you as a sub-site supervisor, you would not be allowed to ask or require your VISTAs to lead a prayer group at a faith-based organization, but they can certainly attend worship services and religious activities on their own time, separate from VISTA. A couple of other things to mention, as you see on the screen, early terminations. These don't happen too often, but there are times where a VISTA may have a change in plans, for example, getting a job, desiring to leave. That is something we call an early termination. Hopefully the VISTA goes to you and lets you know that, but all that information is processed through the corporation state office. Also, removal from project. There may, hopefully not, be a circumstance where you may have some problems with your VISTA and you may request that that VISTA leave the VISTA project. Only the corporation state office can officially remove the VISTA from the project. So you want to make sure that any grievances or problems, any meetings you had with the VISTA about the issue are documented in writing, and you'd want to make sure you submit that to your corporation state office so that they can assess the situation, and if need be, they would be the ones to officially remove the VISTA from the project. And lastly, of course, we do not allow nepotism or favoritism with respect to the VISTA program. The VISTA Member Support Unit that we call the VMSU handles VISTA benefits and pay, and we do tell VISTAs at PSO when to call them and how to get in touch with them, but we do provide this information to you just in case you may need to call the VMSU to obtain information on a VISTA's behalf. One quick important note is that the VMSU is different from the National Service Hotline, but you must contact the National Service Hotline in order to be connected with the VMSU. And you can call them, fax them, or submit a web form via questions.nationalservice.gov. On this slide, you'll see that our VMSU supports VISTAs in many areas, most of which include benefits. We do wanted to highlight some of these for you. Obviously, we won't go into each one in detail, but your VISTAs may come to you with questions about travel or reimbursement, things like that. All of these are information that the VMSU is aware of, so again, you may need to call the VMSU on the VISTA member's behalf in case there's a question. But for example, we'll just quickly highlight under travel where it says reimbursements. For example, we, the corporation, in VISTA program reimburse VISTAs for traveling to PSO and all their incidental expenses. However, if you require your VISTA to go to a meeting for their service or travel to and from point A to point B, they would have to talk to you to determine how your organization would reimburse them for that service-related travel. There is more information on all of these detail on the VISTA Member Handbook, and the most up-to-date and always accurate member handbook is located on the vistacampus.gov. So if you do have questions about those, you can talk to that, and that information will be there for you. With that, I will now turn it over to Amy to review some common to-do terms.
Thank you, Eric. And I just wanted to let folks know we are keeping track of questions, and we will get to questions in just a few minutes. So let's take a look now at some tasks that sub-site supervisors are often need to do as part of their role. And again, keep in mind that you'll want to check in with your intermediary organization to define exact roles and tasks for you and also the things that they will be taking care of. So the first thing is recruitment and selection. All supervisors, as part of the recruitment and selection process, need to orient themselves to the format and the purpose of the VISTA assignment description, or VAD. The VAD guides the VISTA year and helps define the type of person that you'll be looking to recruit. You may be asked to participate in the member recruitment and selection process by your intermediary organization. So work closely with them to outline your specific tasks and roles, as I suggested. Some sub-sites take on all of these tasks, while others only do a few. The task list we reviewed earlier when we visited the VISTA campus is a good way to frame this conversation with your intermediary organization. And the task list includes links and resources for recruiting and selecting members. So there's a lot more information that you can find on the VISTA campus, but this is generally how recruitment lays out for most projects. So you'll need to figure out with your intermediary where you fit in to this process. Earlier we touched on your role as a sub-site supervisor, but we want to stress again that coaching, mentoring, and support are crucial elements to member success. You are the leadership for your VISTA member. And just to show how important it is, we wanted to share a few facts from a recent study conducted last year by JBS International. And you'll see in this, on this slide that there are a lot of themes here around checking in often, and really feeling supported by their supervisor, receiving coaching. So again, coaching and support we know are crucial to member success and crucial to retaining members for their entire service year. The other thing that you'll need to do as a sub-site supervisor is assist your member with onboarding and also on-site orientation and training, which are very similar. I wanted to put this quote about onboarding up here on the slide because I think it's so important for people to think about how you bring someone in from an organizational outsider to become an organizational insider. And that's what this section is all about. And of course, there's a lot more detail that you need to cover. So coaching and support starts with on-site orientation and training. And then OSOT's important because members will settle in faster and they'll learn the basic knowledge and skills that they need to get started on your project sooner when you provide on-site orientation and training. So let's take a look at some typical OSOT activities for VISTA members. Here's a sample list of topics for OSOT. These came from a detailed planning checklist. It's about 3 pages. That resides within the Supervisor Orientation Workbook. So the Supervisor Orientation Workbook is important for everyone to know about because it contains the information and worksheets that folks receive when they go to the face-to-face training. So I wanted to make sure you all knew about it. The workbook is available to download from the VISTA campus at vistacampus.gov, and I'll be sure to include a link directly to the workbook with the session recording. The OSOT checklist can be found on page 74 of the workbook, and again, it's a detailed checklist of the things you need to cover, and that includes introduction to your organization and community, an orientation to the purpose and mission of your organization, a discussion and review of the member assignment and VISTA assignment description, a discussion about supervisory roles and communication, and also the professional development opportunities and plan for your VISTA member. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who's going to talk a little bit more about reporting and evaluation. Take it away, Eric.
Thank you, Amy. We'll spend just a minute or two talking about the reports that CNCS and the VISTA program require you to give you a little bit of detail to help you write these reports. This slide lists the required reports that are submitted through eGrants and when they are due. So first, your sponsor is responsible for monitoring you as a sub-site supervisor and will ask you to report on this information or provide information to them to report. One helpful hint is to consider providing your VISTAs a similar type of report to complete in advance of your due date so that you have the necessary information and it correlates directly with our reports. To start off with, sponsor verification is a biweekly process that requires action in eGrants from the sponsor. This lets CNCS and the VISTA program know which VISTAs are still serving, which ones have ended service, and so on. The eGrant system will automatically send out an email to the project director or sponsor every 2 weeks to remind you to complete this action. As sub-site supervisors, you may not specifically see the emails, but your sponsor may come to you for information if they're the ones getting the email. The Project Progress Report, also known as PPR, is filled out by you and the project director and submitted to the CNCS State Office quarterly for new projects and semi-annually for current projects. Please note that although this is the standard for the VISTA program in terms of when these reports are due, your project director may ask you for information monthly or more frequently at their discretion. This report contains information on VISTA member activities, resource development, analysis of accomplishments and progress, and more. One quick note about the PPR is that you will oftentimes hear the term performance measures because these are what you will be reporting on and what we will use to track progress. We also briefly talk about these at PSO so that VISTAs know that the activities they're performing and the service they're doing are related to performance measures, and that information needs to go to you for the report. Your progress report will describe in detail how your VISTA project is accomplishing work in that specific category of performance measures. Lastly, the VISTA Progress Report Supplement, also known as VPRS, is only submitted annually at the end of the fiscal year and contains data and details from the entire year. So for example, this report may contain a compilation of all the information in all of your year's project progress reports. The VISTA campus is constantly being updated to provide information that will assist you in your role as a sub-site supervisor. So please make sure that as we refer to these reports, more information will be provided later on the VISTA campus to make sure that you specifically know what your role is and how to fill these reports out. Now I will turn it back to Kapila to facilitate a discussion about all the topics that we covered today.
Thank you, Eric. So at this point, Amy, Eric, Lois, and myself, we would like to open it for conversation, discussion about any challenges that you would like to put on the table and to look at how one might go about addressing them. So I know Lois has been monitoring the questions. And Amy, are we only using the chat function? Are we also accommodating the phone questions?
Process-wise, that's a great question. Let's go ahead and use the chat panel as much as possible. So we'll address questions in the chat first, and then we can go to the raise hand feature for people who want to ask a question verbally. So at this point, please go ahead and post your questions into the chat, and that way we'll have a nice running list to review.
Thank you, Amy. And Lois, if you could, kindly maybe highlight the question on the list, and that way we can address that.
Yes, I think one question that has come up, and there has been a little bit of discussion among the participants, is about taking VISTA's taking outside classes. Whether this is acceptable, how many, and some of the people indicated that they get sometimes inconsistent information from the VMSU versus what's in the manual. And Eric, maybe you can speak to that?
Sure, thank you, Lois. First, quickly with regard to classes, yes, VISTAs are permitted to be enrolled in classes, whether it be part-time or full-time. That's completely up to them. The caveat, though, is that VISTAs should be available and accessible to their VISTA project whenever needed. It does not mean that they're serving actually 24/7, but if a if a VISTA project needs a VISTA to be there on a Tuesday evening and the VISTA member has class, the VISTA project comes first. So they need to understand that. And also the approval for the VISTA to be taking class and be a VISTA as well needs to come from you as the supervisor so that you actually know what the VISTA's class schedule is and what their VAD says to make sure that they do have the capability of completing their VAD. The other question, Lois, in terms of conflicting information, we certainly hope that conflicting or inaccurate information is not being sent out by anyone, but if it is, or I saw another question about people having a difficult time getting in touch with the VMSU, please know that your corporation state office is always there as a backup. If you do have any questions or issues or concerns, please let them know, and that information will either come to my office or another office to investigate to make sure that the information is correct. But know that you should always have direct communication with your state office in that event. Thank you.
There's another question or statement from Marcia saying that as an intermediary, they have instructed their sites and members that the sub-site supervisors should not complete the PPR. And I just wondered whether or not this is this a variable rule, or is it up to the intermediaries, or is this a requirement of CNCS?
Typically the person who is directly supervising the VISTA, and oftentimes that is a sub-site supervisor, is the person who completes the PPR. Since they have the most direct contact with the VISTA, they're the ones who are directly overseeing the VISTA and their VAD. But it's not necessarily required that that person be the one to fill it out. So if your sponsor told you that you don't have to fill it out, that's up to them as long as they're the one. Someone has to fill it out, but in that case, they would be coming to you as the sub-site supervisor most likely to get the information for the PPR. So it's certainly possible, but usually it's the direct supervisor that fills it out.
Okay. There's a question here about some confusion around the loan forbearance. Some have experienced some not very helpful remarks or comments from the VMSU that they're not familiar. Is there, can we point them to specific resources that can give them accurate information?
We can certainly do that because it takes too long to describe, but we do have information that we give VISTAs pretty extensively at PSO about loan forbearance, but we can find the link on the campus and post that information a little bit later or send it out with the PowerPoint in about a week or so, as Amy mentioned. Great question.
Are there any other questions that I have overlooked that are in the chat? And if not, are there any additional questions?
There is a question I see that says, if a VISTA signs on for a second year, do they still get their end of service money?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Good.
And Lois, I would also like to highlight something that Eric pointed out earlier, which we also try to highlight during the actual supervisor orientations, face-to-face sessions. And that is, whenever you have such administrative or rules or regulation-related question, as I pointed out, we are kindly inviting you. Your first stop is your state office program specialist, whoever the person that you are directly working with, as well as another resource that, as one of our colleagues pointed out through the chat function, is also don't forget about the VISTA, the handbook, the program handbook.
Mm-hmm. Another question has come in from Cynthia Schaub, and this has to do with talking with the VISTA about including them, the supervisors, in conversations that their VISTAs are having with community organizations. This is and there's another person who is also interested in that. I wonder whether, what other people's experience with this is. Is this a problem? Seems to me it involves the communication and the trust level with the supervisors and the VISTA members. But anyone have any thoughts about this?
So, Lois, one of the things that I would contribute towards this question, one aspect, one of the things that we kindly invite you to work to have these conversations right at the beginning with your VISTA members, setting the communication expectations as well as any community engagement, how you would like the VISTA to go about communicating it with you, as well as, making you a part of the process when it is appropriate. Now, one of the things as we looked at capacity building is about transfer of knowledge, products, and relationships. So that is also something that you want to make sure that it is part of the conversation, because whatever the contact or the engagement or the connections the VISTA is making in the community also has to be transferred to the organization. That is, the ultimate outcome of that capacity building focus. So that's why it is very, very important also to have those conversations right at the beginning and then come up with clear expectations of both parties, you as a supervisor as well as on the VISTA side.
And just to build on that, there's another aspect of it that I think it was good to consider, is that I think to some degree the kind of relationship that you as a supervisor have with your VISTA members, that kind of relationship is going to vary depending upon the individuals and what the actual project involves. So in some cases, you may definitely want to be included in any kind of interactions with the community. In other cases, you might allow the VISTA to have more autonomy and then give you reporting back. Now, I think that it's going to vary from situation to situation and from supervisor to supervisor, but it is something to think about, that the nature of your reporting relationship can vary.
This is Amy. I just want to do a time check. We're at about 1 minute past the hour here, and I just wanted to say that we as facilitators are happy to stay on the line for another 10 minutes or so if there's additional questions. But we do realize that some of you may have other meetings or commitments, so if you do need to jump off now, we just want to do a little bit of a commercial for our next webinar that's going to be happening in March. In April, and it's April 22nd.
Yeah.
And also, if you missed the January or February sessions, you can watch those on demand on the VISTA campus. And like I said before, we'll send a follow-up email with all these links and information for you. The next webinar on April 22nd will be specifically for intermediary organizations that have multiple sites that need to train their sub-site supervisors. So if you have other questions, feel free to go ahead and add those to the chat panel. And if you need to hop off, we hope to see you next time. Any other questions that folks have, go ahead and post those in the chat panel. Also at this time, let's do a call for questions on the phone. If you have a question and you're on the phone, go ahead and raise your hand, and I will unmute your phone line. Any questions on the phone? I'm not seeing any. Lois, do we have any other questions in the chat panel that we want to address before we officially sign off?
Not yet. We have some, no, there are no other questions that have been posted at this time.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any hands either, so let's go ahead and officially end the session for today. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we look forward to seeing you online at a webinar in the near future. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Bye now.
Bye.